The Sikha we will be learning today is in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Dalet, the first Sikha to Parsha Shoftim. The Negeya to the mitzvah for Minim Melech, concerning the mitzvah that's written in Parsha Shoftim, that we have to appoint a king. As the Pasuk says, Same Tosim Alecha Melech, you shall put a Melech upon you, which means you shall appoint a king, which is called the mitzvah of Minim Melech. The Yidden have an obligation to appoint a king upon themselves. Is Yedua the Shaila, we know the famous question. And in Ha'ara Tut, the Rabbi brings many sources where the question is asked. The Barbanel asks, and the Kleyokor, and the Radak, and the Rambam himself even asked the question. What's the question concerning this mitzvah? When the Yidden asked Shmuel Hanovi, give us a king, they asked him to appoint a king. He said, he was very unhappy about it. And the Eibishter himself, Hashem himself said to Shmuel, that you're right. You know why they want a king? Because they don't like me. They're disgusted with me. Which means the Eibishter also was unhappy with the fact that they were asking for a king. So the question is, this is a mitzvah that Hashem commanded the Yidden. It's a mitzvah. So what's wrong? What was wrong with what they did when they asked for a king? Especially to what the Chazal say, Gimel mitzvahs nistavi Yisrael b'knisos l'oretz. There were 3 mitzvahs that Yidden were commanded upon entering Eretz Yisrael that they have to do, and the first one is lahamid lamelech. They have to appoint a king. Then you have to destroy Amalek. You have to build a Beis Hamikdash. But the first one of the 3, you have to appoint a king. For the fun is moving. For that, we understand that this is a mitzvah nailis b'yoseh. This is a very big mitzvah. It's not just a mitzvah. It's a very important big mitzvah. For the mitzvahs at Luis Boris, even amongst the mitzvahs that are only in Eretz Yisrael, amongst those mitzvahs, this is a special mitzvah because this is the first one that they have to do. So we see that there is a very special mitzvah to appoint a king. So why did Shmuel Hanovi say that it was wrong, was unhappy? Why did the Eibishter say it was wrong? If it's a mitzvah, and it's a big mitzvah. On the other hand, if for some reason, the fact that they asked for a king at that time was something that was not good, something that was not positive, now it's possible that for some reason that the timing wasn't good at that time, they shouldn't have asked for a king. So let's say it is for some reason, and that's why it was wrong. If it was wrong, why did Hashem say to Shmuel, go ahead, listen to them and give them a king? If it's wrong, why should Hashem tell them to give in to what they're asking for? So the Rebbe says like this: in Chassidus is in them avoid. In Chassidus, this is explained. That the purpose why Hashem gave this mitzvah of appointing and making a king, there are 2 ways, 2 ifanim, 2 reasons, so to speak, 2 kinds of inyonim in this inyan of making a king. One level, one eifun is higher than the other eifun. Number 1, the first one, which is the lower one, Atam Poshet, the very simple reason why there is an inyan to make a king, why we have to make a king. Because, as the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, if not for the fear, meaning the fear shal malchus, the fear of the government, which means of the king, employee. A person would swallow his friend. People would swallow each other. People would kill each other. So we need the government, which is based on the king, to make sure that people are civilized and to behave properly. The king should take care, run the thing, and he should make that the behavior of the people from the country should be properly. Even though, because it's very possible people will not behave properly, even the people who understand what is proper behavior, it's possible even those people will not necessarily behave properly. Because because even when your seichel and your intellect understands the proper way to behave, that's still not enough. That doesn't mean that you will behave that way. Because as we know, Rashi brings down that the eye sees and the heart desires. There are certain things which you know are no good, but when you see it, and it brings out a certain emotion, a certain desire, and it arouses in a person certain feelings, and it's possible he will not follow what his seichel tells him that is wrong, and you still behave in the not right way because of the taiva a person has. That's why you have to come on to the fear of the king, which causes that you should behave in the proper way. So that's a very simple reason for a king, that the king runs the country, make sure that the country runs civilized and people behave properly and they don't hurt each other, etc., etc. That's one reason basically of having a king. The second one, base, the matzav is as even if the situation is that the person's mind, the person's intellect controls the heart constantly. And therefore, even if his heart desires to do something wrong, let's say he sees something that somebody else has, he knows you're not allowed to steal, he might go steal. But if your mind is controlling the heart, you will not come to steal. So even in the situation when a person will not come to behave improperly, and for that reason, we don't need a king. So we don't need a king for making sure that you behave properly. But there's still certain things, certain things that the regular common people, common folks, don't understand how you have to behave in these inyonim. Certain things everyone understands. Question is, you might not listen to what your brain tells you. You might nevertheless not behave properly. But there are certain things that Itaka don't understand. So a regular person does not understand. No, the melech mitzad malose, but the king, because of his specialty, because of his greatness, was mishich mikolam, that from his shoulder and up, he's above the regular people. Actually, this is a lashon written concerning Shaul HaMelech. When Shmuel HaNavi made Sholem and he saw Shaul HaMelech, he saw that he was so tall. He was so tall that every average person reached his shoulder. And Chassidus explains, what does that mean? The Rabbi says in Order 9 from Neit HaTorah and other places in Chassidus where we see that it doesn't mean physically he was a tall person. It means he was so great that his shoulders, which is the lower level of the person, the higher level is the brain, his shoulders were above the brain of other people. That means his brain was much higher. So the Melech is supposed to be a king which understands things which normal people, regular, ordinary people don't understand. So the king versteht it. So there are certain things that people don't understand what to do, but the king does understand. When the guitar is good, and he gives out decrees how people should behave. And the people from the country do that. The king said so. So here we have two ways why you need a king. Number one is push it physically, make sure that people don't hurt each other. People behave civilized, behave normal. And the higher level is that even if people would behave normal, civilized, there's a king needed. The king is needed for a higher inyon in which people don't normally understand. And the king will bring it to them and tell them what to do, which is because of things that they don't understand. And that's why we need a king. That's in Pashtus. That's the simple explanation why we need a king these two ways. Now what the Rebbe is going to do is go in more details and take these same two levels and explain it in a refined way, in a higher way, in an edeler way, how you have the same two levels, but not so simple as we said before, in a higher and more refined way. And the Rebbe says, and this is the whole meaning of why we need a king in the pnimius and the root of the thing by Yidden. What we said before is even by Goyim, lahavdil, that first of all, the people should behave properly. And then there is the king is a smart person and he knows better and he could tell us what to do, things that we don't understand. But now the Rebbe is going to explain that by Am Yisrael, the same two levels, a little bit higher, a little bit more refined. By Yidden, who's the real king? The real master and the real king by Yidden is Hashem. And when you appoint a human being as a king, is the mamutza was is megala malchusi is boruch tzidin. He's the intermediate that reveals Hashem's majesty, Hashem's malchus, Hashem's rulership and kingdom to Yidden. That was really we're trying to get Hashem's malchus into the Yidden. They should feel that. That should be begila by them. And the king is supposed to bring that into the Yidden. And in that, you have two ways, similar to the two ways that we said before. The first way is like this. Yidden on their own believe in the Eibishter. Verstehen und fühlen, als Chayes nimmt sich vom Achusses HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Yidden understand and feel that their life comes from Hashem, from the Malchus of Hashem. But those that should bring out by Yidden, they should be nullified themselves. They should be bottled to Hashem. The Sha'asober is in a matzavum as they felt on their bittul, but if they are in a level that they're missing this bittul to Hashem, so then they need a king, a human being, by being afraid and having awe and fear for this human being, the king, that brings on in them, they should have a fear to the king of the kings, which is Hashem. So that's similar to the first level we said that you need Pasha the king, Pasha to make you behave properly. So by Yid, it's in a higher level, that they each should have proper bittul to Hashem. Really, you should have a bittul to Hashem, but not everybody does have bittul. And if you don't have bittul to Hashem, you need a king. And the king leads the person. When you have bittul to the king, through that, you get bittul to the Eibishter. So that's the lower level of why you need a king. But then you have the higher level, which is similar to the second level we said before. Wie es darf zu sein. Und es ist voran der Bittel zu Lukus mit Zalatzman. But if Yidden are behave properly, and the Bittel that they expect the Yid to have, they have to get. See, before we were saying if they don't have the Bittel, they should. The king brings that Bittel. That's the lower level. But what happens if it's a time when the Yidden have the Bittel to the Eibishter? So this lower Bittel, the simple Bittel that you have to Hashem, they have. Demelt is the roof to Femini Melech, then the whole purpose of a king, of appointing a king, in a Hecher Neif, then it's a higher level. There are levels in godliness, in connection of godliness, or in Gilui, the revelation of godliness to a person. There are levels that the person, the Yidden on their own, cannot reach those levels. Because these levels are beyond their grasp, beyond their understanding. Is there Melech? So therefore, then you have a king. Because he's so great, he has an understanding and the grasp even in the higher levels. So he is mamshich mashpia zeitzam Yisrael. He brings it down and influences the Eden with this higher level. This brings about by Eden that they should have the higher level of bittul. A bittul was his hecher for zeir avonu asogim. A bittul that's higher than understanding, which is similar to the second way we said before, the simple way. The simple way, there's things that you know that you have to do. And then sometimes, even if you properly behave the way you understand is right, there are certain things beyond your understanding. And the king, who's smarter, will tell you what to do. Here it's in the ruchnius. That means that there's a bittul to the kus that you might have. First level is that you don't even have the lower level of bittul. So the king brings you to that level. If you do have that, then you have the king for a separate reason, a higher reason, that he will bring you to such bittul, which is because of a hasogan understanding, which is beyond your own understanding, and it is the king who could bring you to those higher madrigas. Now, this already answers the questions that we asked before. Shmuel HaNavi gewollt that the matzah for Yidden soll sein. Shmuel HaNavi wanted that the level of the Yidden should be in a neifnas, is on stehen mit a bittel zu Lukus mit Zalatzman. He expected and he wanted the Yidden have the lower level of bittel they should have on their own. You don't need a king for that. Nicht unkommendig Samela, not to come on to a king for that. Und der Melech, so was Peil sein, die hechere Darge von Bittel Yidden. And the king should affect the Yidden. They should have the higher level of Bittel and the higher level of Yidden of awe to Hashem. And Bechlal, generally using the terminology of Chassidus, they should have Yireh Eloi. You know, it says that in Yireh Hashem there are two levels. It's called Yireh Tato, the lower level of Yireh, which is Bittel, and Yireh Eloi, the higher level. So the king, if you have the lower level of Bittel, then the king will give you the higher level of Bittel. So what Shmuel HaNavi expected, and that was the mitzvah of the Eibishter saying that you have to have a king, because expecting that the lower level every Yid will have anyway. So the Eibishter said, make a king, and the king will give you a higher level of Bittel. The Eden asked, we want a king like all the nations. A melech was a bazevavonen for nishas reyachaim. A push the king that should make sure that the people don't swallow each other, people don't hurt each other, which means the lower level. Was das weiße bazev gefällt Darge von Yerushalayim. That shows that if they were asking for a king to accomplish that, it means that they were missing even that lower level of Yerushalayim. Was Eden that you didn't have to have on their own. The father of the Reibishter is okay. So that's what the Reibishter said. You know what, they're asking for a king because they don't like me. It's felt by the Yerushalayim. They're missing a simple Yerushalayim. This movement that we understand. Nevertheless, even though Hashem was upset, he gave in to them. and to make a king the way they want it. If Yidden are missing this level of Yidden, whatever reason, even if it's wrong, they should have this level of Yidden Shemaim, the lower level. But if they happen to be missing, even though really he should reach this level of Bittul without a king, this lower level, he still can wait. Say, well, don't have a king. Wait till he'll get it himself, and then we'll give you the king for the higher level. We should wait. In the meantime, we'll have the Yid missing the Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim, accepting the yoke of Hashem. So therefore, right away, a Yid has to take upon himself a king. Should make sure the lower level that he should not hurt somebody or have at least the lower level of Bittul of Yireh Shamayim. And then when the time passes, that they're into the dargah from Bittul in Yireh, and then the king will bring him to the level of Bittul at the lower level, to the dargah from Suga Beis, the Chamelech canal, and then they'll reach the second level. So the king will make the first level, and then the second level. So we understand the kasha was, if it's a mitzvah, why did Hashem say and Shmuel and Navi say it's no good? And if it's taka no good for some reason, why did he give in? The answer is Hashem gave him mitzvah, but the mitzvah is because he wanted there should be the higher level, but for the lower level, you don't need a king. But if they asked for it, Hashem was upset. Look, you don't have the real Bittul, even the lower level. But if you don't have it, you got to have a king for that reason. The only question one might ask, if you look in the pasuk where it says in Parsha Shoftim, when Hashem gave the mitzvah of same tosim alech hamelech, make a king, the loshen was there that the time will come, you will ask osim alay melech kechol hagayim asher v'yisicha. That Hashem, when he gave the mitzvah, he said that you will ask that we want a king like all the nations. So here the Rebbe said that when the Yidden asked for the king, why was it wrong? Because they used the loshen, we want a king like all the nations, which means a simple king. And that's not what the Eibishter meant when he gave the mitzvah. But if you look at the parsha where it talks about the mitzvah, in Parsha Shoftim, in the mitzvah it says, you are going to ask for a king like all the nations, and the pasuk says, do it. So we see l'chatchila in the mitzvah is put in that it should be like all the nations. So the Rebbe says in order 10, look on the Ramban, that when the Eibishter said, you're going to tell me, make a melech like all the nations, and Hashem says, okay, so do it, it was a hint for what's actually going to take place in the future. Because that's how it was. And the apostle is saying, you're going to ask me for a king, all the nation, which is going to be. But that's not why David gave the hand. David said, make a king. But he really meant make a king for the higher madrega. But since you're going to ask for the low madrega, let it be for the low madrega. But asking for a king like all the nations just for the lower level, that's not the mila of the kingship like Al-Pitayra, what David really wants. Then the Rebbe says, from everything you have to take out a lesson in the service of Hashem. And the lesson is like this. Even though in time of exile there is no king. Tell us, Man Malke Rabbanon. Who are the kings? The Chachamim, the scholars, the Chachamim. And therefore, just like there is a mitzvah to appoint a king, so a Yid has a commandment from the Torah to put upon himself a melech, which is to have a Rav, a Rabbanon, will be on top of him, that he should have somebody on top of him who he should get as to give him the hashpah. And that's what it says in Pirkei Avos, Asei lechorav. Make yourself a Rav, make yourself a teacher, which means a Rav will teach you. And them is the Rav now. So since making a Rav is similar to the mitzvah of Mina Melech, so based on what we said before, we will have a lesson to this union of making yourself a Rav. There are some who think, as when they gave the Nidiri Kenyonim, concerning simple things, lower things, they could understand themselves, or they could decide themselves. For that, they don't need to ask for a Rav. For small things, don't have to ask for a Rav. The Mishnah zogt asei l'charav, yet the read of Rav, but the Mishnah says differently. The Mishnah says, make yourself a Rav. And who's the Mishnah talking to? The Mishnah is talking to every Yid. Every Yid has to have a Rav. So even though a person knows what the Mishnah says, that every Yid has to make a Rav, but they think This means that great things, the higher special things. It comes to simple things, is you believe in yourself. And darf don't come to the Hashpah from the Rav. You don't need for the Hashpah from the Rav. He can do that himself. You see to yourself that time is passing and you're still in the same low level. So you see that you're missing God. You thought you could solve all your problems in the lower things. You see your problems are still there. You're still not the way you're supposed to be. So still a person could think, it's not worthwhile for these small things to go to a Rav. If it I go wait. I'll wait till Hashem sends a special spirit upon me. And I will get the yira the way I'm supposed to, even though now I don't have the yira. And it'll do everything himself to fix whatever you have to fix yourself. Like that means the Yero for Mina Melech Baruchni sits there. So now we have the lesson from the mitzvah making the Melech like it was then now. What was the mitzvah Mina Melech? So first thing is the mitzvah Melech is, that's not the top list, but at least that if you're missing in simple things, simple bittul, simple Yira Shemayim, the Melech will give it to you. Now that the Rav is in the place of the Melech, so even for simple things, when you're lacking simple Yira Shemayim, you have to go to the Rav. Even though it says, the Eibush has put a king upon you. Now, the real way the Eibush wants the king upon you is not for that. It's for the higher levels. Not for simple Yira Shemayim, it's for the higher level of Yira. So the Rebbe says here, Agam Alecha Bayidin, because the Pasuk says, same Tosim Alecha, make a king on you. So Bayidin is in Yoni Plus Shemela Beikir, the main thing of the union of a king. Shayach ben Gates Hecher Madregas is concerning higher Madregas. But if it's a case like over there by the Eden that they were discussing with Hashem, Chas v'Sholem, which means that they don't have the lower level of Yira Shemayim, or the Rachshashev, not even if it's actually that, but there's a suspicion, maybe you might come to that level of missing the lower level of Yira Shemayim. Of them, you need to use having the fear of the Melech, which in this case is the Rav, even for some smooth things. So we see from here, just like over there, when even though the mitzvah of making a Melech is for the higher things, but if you're missing the lower things, you need a Melech for that too. So everyone has to know that he has to have a Rav even for lower things. But there are some people at Taine, as a Gefinah nit for sich kein Rav. They can't find a Rav for themselves. There's no person who they think consider them they could become their Rav, which is in this case like their Melech. They have to know that this is from the advice and the convincing of the Yetzer Hara. Warum le Alman Yisrael? Le Alman Yisrael means Yidden are not like a widower. There's always somebody. In order 13, the Rabbi even brings from Medish, Ein Dosh Ebe Kamesha. There's no generation that doesn't have somebody like Mesha. Just like Mesha was the Melech, every generation could always find, in different levels, they could always find the Melech. Was in the Shaykh is the Metzias, there's no such thing. As Sevishin Eden soll nicht sein, einer was hat mehr Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem von ihm. That amongst Eden there shouldn't be one person that has more love of Hashem and more fear of Hashem than you. Und kann bemele sein for him a Rav, but he could be for him a Rav. But nor the Ruth of sein Asay. The Losh in the Mishnah is Asay Loch Rav. Make yourself a Rav. Means you got to work hard. Work on it. So even though it might be hard to find one, and sometimes it's stuck hard, and you feel you have to put in effort, Asay, put in effort. And then the Rebbe adds another thing. The word Asay has another meaning. Asay means make. Now to make, you got to do something, you got to work. But it also sometimes means force. Asay could mean force. There's a lotion in the Gemara which says, that you're allowed to force. Besden could force a yid to give tzedakah. And what's the lotion? To make a yid, force a yid to give tzedakah. The lotion is maisin. It's the same thing here. When it says Asay l'charav, it means force. Force yourself. Kfiyas yeshes atzmei. To force your own ego, that sometimes you have to force it, so don't force it. When you get, you have to have a haravanya, you have to toil hard. You have to work hard till you will find a Rav which is going to be, you will get his advice. Because you can't rely on yourself. You must have a Rav. Because if you're yourself, you're not objective. And if you're not objective, you'll never come to the true understanding. And the Rebbe brings in order 16, it says in Pirkei Avos, Al taimim ba'atzmecha, don't believe in yourself. You cannot trust yourself. So you can't say, I'm going to take care of it myself. Memuz hob marav, you have to have a rav. On your gaito umetzosa. If you work hard, you will find. If you will work hard and you will work honestly, you will find the rav. On the rav, at metim einlernen the parshas, but the melech v'kleine b'hakel. Now, the rav is in the place of a melech. Now, where do we find the influence of the king? The pale, we find it every time the king, everything was influence on the people. But they find the mitzvah of hakel. The mitzvah of hakel is when once in 7 years, the sukkahs after Shemitah, the king, all the Yidden would come to Yerushalayim, men, women, children, everyone would come, and the king would read for them some of the parshias of Chumash. And that's where we see the real concept of the influence of the king, because he would teach them these parshas. And what parshas would it be? Shema, V'hoyim Shemeya. He would teach the parsha Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And parsha V'hoyim Shemeya Tishma, you should listen to Hashem. And in this order, Friya Shema, first Shema, was is Kabbalah Semalch Shemayim. Shema, the Gemara says, is the parsha that teaches you how to accept the yoke of Hashem, of Malchus Shemayim, the Malchus, because we're talking about Malchus, because the real king is the Eibishter. The Melech just brings us to have the bittul to the Eibishter. So the king would read the parsha of Shema, first Shema, which is Kabbalah Semalch Shemayim, und the Noch, V'hoyim Shemeya, and then it says in the next parsha he would read, if you listen to Hashem, V'hoyim Shemeya Tishma Hashem, what will happen? Hashem will give you Mataratzach, give you the rain, V'safta Diganecha, you will be able to gather your grain, etc., etc. But in Geben zu verstehen, the second step is that the king not only causes you to have Kabbalah Semalch Shemayim, but after that he also explains that you should understand, you should grasp that the gathering of the grain, which means getting the livelihood, is totally in the Shemaya Tishma, depends on Shemaya Tishma. So this is what the king would read. So this is what you need a Rav for, which is like the king, to teach you these in your name. And after the Rav will be me'erer, awaken in the person the lower level of bittul and Kabbalah of accepting the yoke of Hashem. That if the noch mamshach sein der Hecher Madrege, and after that, when he'll reach that level, the king in this case the Rav will bring into him to the higher madreges, which is Yireh Elo, the higher madrege of Yireh to Hashem, which is similar to what the king is according to the Torah. What the purpose of the king is to reach the higher level of Yireh. All this has a special connection to the time right before Mashiach, Erev Bias Mashiach Zekenu, the eve of the coming of Mashiach. The union of Mashiach is both in Yonah, we know that. His union is a Rav, he's a teacher. Like it says, Yelamet Teir Alaman, Mashiach is going to teach Torah to everybody. Afilu L'Oves, Umesh Rabbeinu, even to the Oves, Umesh Rabbeinu, Mashiach is going to teach him. So Mashiach is a Rav. And Mashiach is also a Melech, he's also a king. He's called Malka Mashiach, the king Mashiach, Melech HaMashiach. So when we're talking here in the Sikha about the union of a Melech, and then he applies the union of a Rav, it has a connection special to Mashiach, because Mashiach is like both of these in Yonah. Mashiach is a Rav, and Mashiach is a Melech. And you have to take the lesson from here that number one, if you're in the lower Madrega, you don't even have the simple Yireh Shamayim. You have to have the Melech and time of the Melech, and now you have to have a Rav to teach you and help you get to the lower level. And then after you have that level, the real union of the Rav is like the Melech, who was to bring him to a higher level of Yireh. The Rav also should bring you to a higher level of Yireh, the level of Yireh Eloi.